was a nice decoration that you got.
Well, I hope you like it. It's a poinsettia.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions, and you just go ahead and answer. So, first, let's start off by telling me your name and where you were born and when you were born.
What is that? Tell me that again.
When were you? Well, let's start with your name.
My name is Helen L Schmidt.
And you were born when?
September 20th, 1914.
And where were you born?
What?
Where were you born?
In Troy, Kansas.
Troy, Kansas. Okay.
On a farm. My parents lived on the farm.
And did you have siblings?
Yes, I have 4 brothers and 4 sisters.
And where did you come in sequence of the brothers and sisters? Are you the oldest, the youngest, the middle?
I'm third oldest of the children.
And the older ones, were they boys or girls?
4 brothers and 4 sisters.
And the older one was a brother or a sister?
What?
Which ones were the older ones? Who's the oldest? Who's the oldest that was born first?
The others that were born?
Yeah.
My older sister was Edna.
Okay.
And then my brother is Harold. And then I come. And then comes Herbert. And then Dorothy. And then Marguerite. And then Raymond. And Esther. And Charles.
Okay, great. And do you remember your first school? Your first day in school?
No, I don't remember the first day of school.
Do you remember going to school?
I went to a country school, I know that.
And how did you go to school? How did you get there?
What? How did I get to school? We walked. We had a half a mile to school until when I was in the 8th grade, then I went to confirmation classes in the religious school. I went 2 miles to the church for a year in my last year of school. And many times I walked and many times I rode. My father would take me and sometimes I rode the horse.
What was your horse's name?
One was Nellie, and then Barney was the spunky horse. He was the riding horse, but I didn't ride him very often. He belonged to my brother.
And when you went to school, would you bring a lunch with you, or would they make lunch for you at school?
No, we carried our lunch.
And what would you typically bring for lunch?
What would we take for lunch?
Yeah.
Oh, sandwiches usually. Bread and butter and peanut butter we had. Sandwiches, egg sandwiches, apples. Once in a great while we had a real treat when we could have bananas.
Great. So tell me about some of the significant times in your childhood, things that happened that were important.
Well, when my little brother Raymond was about 2.5 years old, he had pneumonia. And he was very sick at home. And finally, the doctor took him to the hospital. And when the doctor came to take him to the hospital, we had a snowstorm. And the neighbors along the way kept the road open so that the doctor could get through with his car. My father went with him to the hospital.
And how old were you then?
That was very sad. He was in the hospital quite a while. It was a happy day when he could come home again.
And did he come home?
He came home again, yes.
Good.
Got well again.
Do you remember high school?
What?
Did you go to high school?
No, I didn't go to high school. None of us, we children, went to high school. My father said if one went, it wasn't right, then we should send them all, and they couldn't afford it. So we did. None of us went to high school. Instead, we went out and worked. We did whatever.
What kind of work did you do on the farm?
Oh, we gathered eggs and filled the lamps with oil and kept the oil.
And what kind of oil were you using?
Kerosene.
Mm-hmm. And would you buy that at the store?
Yes, they would deliver it to our place.
And would you heat the house with kerosene?
No, we heated the house with the kitchen stove. We burned cobs and sometimes coal.
And when you were a child, what did you do for entertainment?
We, in the summertime, on Saturday night, they would show a movie in the town. And when my father would go to get the groceries, children would go along and watch the movie. That was the big entertainment that we had.
What was your favorite movie?
Well, they were all Western.
Did you have a favorite that you want to see over and over again?
No, I don't think so.
So, let's talk about when you grew up. You became an adult. You met Vic. Did you meet Vic when you were still young?
What?
How old were you when you met Vic? When you and Vic
When
got
I
together?
Met Vic. Well, Vic was adopted by Theodore and Flora Schmidt. Were my aunt and uncle, really. And he was adopted when he was just a baby by the Schmidts. So he was an adopted cousin. But
Okay.
he was no relation.
And how old were you when you got married?
He was 20 and I was 19, and he was 21 and I was 19.
Okay, so that would have been 1925? No, 1935.
We were married in 34.
34, okay. And then Richard was born. He's your first child, right?
He was first, the oldest, yes. He was 36.
Okay,
In
and
1936 he was born.
okay, and so I guess the next major event in history that happened after 1936 would have been World War II. What do you remember from Pearl Harbor? Where were you when you found out the news that the country was going to war?
Well, we didn't get a radio early when they first came out. We listened to my uncle over the telephone, the country phone. My uncle would call us and tell us when there was a good program on, and we could listen to it over the phone for a while. That was a real treat too.
Wow. So you had a telephone in your house, or you had to go to somewhere to use the phone?
No, we had a telephone in our house.
Uh huh. So that was when you and Vic were married. You had a phone in the house.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
when I was just small yet.
Yeah. And at that time, what did Vic do to work? How did he make a living at that time?
My father was a farmer.
Uh huh. And what about your husband? When you first married, how did he make a living?
He was working for Homeowners Loan Association. He was a stenographer. But then they closed the office where he worked, so he was without a job. He was without work for some time. He did odd jobs.
Let's see. And then, were any family members drafted to go into the war?
And the family member go to the war. Yes, my brother went to the war.
Which brother?
My brother Raymond.
And did he come back?
Yes, he was shot though. He got the Purple Heart. He was very ill when in the hospital in Germany when he was in the war.
Okay.
And then he married a girl that he met over there, and my mother would write his letters for him because he couldn't write German, he couldn't read German. But my mother would write for him. And then he sent for her years later. He had to pay $1,000 to have her come to the States, and he married her.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any life lessons that you've learned that you want to pass on to others?
Life lessons. Well, I learned to crochet, and I tried to teach my children to crochet.
You know, you taught me to crochet when I was small. I remember now. You know, it never stuck with me for some reason. I think I always thought it was a girl's occupation to crochet. Tell me what you think of that picture.
That's no.
It's too silly. Here, I'll show everyone. Okay. So, tell me what it was like in the 60s. While you're married, you and Vic were married, and he was alive in those days when I was small. Was that at that time? Did Vic work at the post office?
You what?
Did Vic work at the post office in the 1960s?
He was a letter carrier.
Okay.
He started out delivering postal letters, and then he worked part-time first. He had to work and wait until he got a route before he worked full-time. He worked for 30 years at the post office.
And during that time, did you need to go to work at all?
I worked part-time. I sewed Avon, worked at things that I could be home with the children most of the time. But then when they were all in school, I got a job at the penny store, J.C. Penny store. And I worked there for a couple of years. And I worked at the hotel as a banquet waitress. Whatever work I could get.
What work did you enjoy doing the most?
I think I was clerking at the penny store most. That was my most enjoyable job.
And tell me about the early years that my dad was a boy. He told me that he spent some time on his grandpa's farm and some time here in Norfolk. Do you remember that?
Spent some time at your folks' place.
Well, at his grandfather's farm.
Oh, your Richard did.
Yeah.
Yeah, your father did. Yeah, he did. He liked to go there in the summertime and help. He had to work awful hard though, for a boy.
Do you remember how he first got the idea to go to West Point College? Military Academy?
In the military academy.
Do you remember how that came about?
He always liked. He liked to go. He wanted to go. That was his choice, to go to the military academy.
Did you want him to go, or did you not want him to go there?
I did. I wanted him to, and yet I didn't want him to go so far away from home. But that was his choice, and if that's what he wanted to do, we gave in.
Mm-hmm.
That was a hard life for him, for hard years.
Yeah, I think he probably enjoyed those years, though. They were hard, but I think they were valuable to him. Yeah. Is there any other topics that you'd like to talk about and tell your future generations about your life?
It was so nice when you come to visit, when you lived in New Jersey, and you came to visit, your folks drove all the way. You were just small yet.
Yeah, I remember those long trips.